I said, out! You don't belong here, not dressed like that. The words cut through the humid late-afternoon air like a rifle crack. A gloved hand gripped the old man's elbow, not gently. The fabric of his perfectly pressed olive uniform wrinkled beneath the pressure. His cap had already fallen, rolling across the concrete like a forgotten relic. It stopped at the foot of a child, no older than 9, who watched with wide, silent eyes. She reached down, but her mother pulled her back. The crowd didn't say a word. The man in uniform did not resist. His left leg shuffled half a step, then paused. The other lagged behind, stiff, uncertain. A cane clacked once, twice against the courthouse pavement. His breathing was measured, shallow. Not out of fear, but control. His spine stayed straight, shoulders square, medals glinting faintly in the dying sun. Behind him, the flags of the United States of America stirred in the late September breeze. The security guard's voice rose again, this time louder, more impatient. I said move, now. You've been told before. This isn't a parade ground. The crowd shifted. Some looked down. Others looked away. A man in a buttoned vest muttered under his breath, "Just an old guy playing soldier." Someone laughed, just once. A breeze caught the edge of the veteran's flag patch. The threadbare stitching flapped weakly as though trying to speak for him. He said nothing. From across the street, a younger man standing beside a rusted Ford pickup slowly raised a phone. He was already filming. A voice in the crowd whispered, "Isn't that the guy who comes every week?" Another added, "Thought he was dead already." Still, the old man didn't move. He stood his ground not like a protester, but like a monument. And the officer, younger, stronger, but rattled somehow, leaned in once more. "This is your last warning. Leave the premises, or we call it in." The veteran turned his eyes upward, faded, gray-blue like smoke after fire, and met the officer's gaze. Calm, steady, unmoving. He reached down and slowly retrieved his cap from the concrete, brushed it off with one hand. The other hand trembled faintly. Then, he placed it gently back on his head, aligning it with a precision long drilled into muscle memory. And again, silence, until a faint click from across the street. A phone call had begun, and someone, not visible yet, was already walking toward the courthouse. If you believe every veteran deserves respect, please subscribe, because every view helps this message reach those who need it most. The sun had dropped lower now, casting long shadows that split across the stone steps of the courthouse like claw marks. Sam Rourke remained where the security officer had left him, near the edge of the plaza, just beyond the reach of the building's shade. His figure, though weathered, stood upright against the sky's softening amber. The pressed lines of his uniform, aged but immaculate, caught what little light remained. Around him the modern world moved on, indifferent, unaware, uninterested. He did not pace. He did not fidget. He simply stood, one hand resting on the curved handle of a worn wooden cane, the other gently clutching a folder, wrapped in a clear plastic sleeve, its edges curled from repetition. Inside it, 24 names were written in blue ink, names smudged by time and weather. The last petition had been signed over 4 months ago, but Sam still brought it every week like scripture. Samuel Rourke, 82 years old, had not missed a Thursday since early spring. His walk from the small assisted rental 2 blocks south was exactly 11 minutes when his knee cooperated. 17 if it didn't. Today it had been closer to 23. But he had made it, as always, in full uniform, boots polished, ribbons straight, buttons aligned with the sharp instinct of a man who had never unlearned the language of discipline. He had come to ask for something simple, something quiet, something just. The plaque by the east wall of the courthouse, honoring the town's Korean War dead, had weathered badly over the years. The names, 24 of them, had faded until only indentations remained. Sam had once traced them with his fingers, one by one, whispering them under his breath. He remembered the way they had sounded when read aloud at the dedication in 1956. He remembered the way his mother had cried when she thought he wouldn't return. He had been 17 when he enlisted, too young by months, but tall enough to lie convincingly. Boot camp had straightened what little boyishness remained. By the time he reached Korea, he was already older than most of the men he buried. Now, those names, Carter, Myers, Ellison, Thomas, were barely legible, erased slowly by wind, rain, and the forgetting of busy lives. Sam had written letters, made phone calls, stopped by the city clerk's office with printed photos, his own money folded inside to help pay for a replacement. No one had been rude, just dismissive, busy. "We'll look into it, sir. It's on the docket. Thanks for bringing it to our attention." Nothing ever changed, so Sam came in person, week after week. Each visit, he brought the same request: restore the plaque, honor the dead. No parade, no speeches, just restoration. On this particular Thursday, something had shifted. A new security officer, younger than the uniform he wore, had taken over the rotation. The kind with mirrored sunglasses and a tight jaw, who saw a uniform not as a bond, but as a challenge. The old man approaching the door had triggered something in him. Suspicion, annoyance, maybe pride. Sam hadn't argued. He never did. Instead, after being turned away, he had simply moved to the side, settled slowly onto the low concrete bench beneath the flagpole, and waited, not out of stubbornness, out of habit. At exactly 4:15 every Thursday, the council chambers unlocked for evening petitions. Citizens could bring forth concerns, small or large, during the first 15 minutes of open session. It was 3:52. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a single mint, unwrapped it with care, and tucked it beneath his tongue. His throat had started to tighten lately in the afternoons. Dryness from medication, probably. The mint helped. He'd asked the pharmacist last month, a young woman with a ponytail and nervous hands, if he could still take his old war pension card to the clinic. She hadn't known. Told him to wait for a call. He never got one. The courthouse plaza was not busy. A few passers-by wandered through, locals mostly, familiar faces whose names Sam had long forgotten. A mother pushing a stroller crossed diagonally, glancing once in his direction before veering off toward the bakery. A man in a tie loosened his collar and stepped into the nearby barber shop. The world didn't stop for old men with paper folders. Sam adjusted his collar, carefully aligning it to the bone of his jaw. His right hand trembled slightly, but he moved with purpose. His cane leaned against his left thigh now, balanced and familiar. The wood had been polished smooth by decades of use, its handle etched faintly with a Marine Corps emblem. He hadn't bought it. It had been a gift from someone whose face he remembered clearer than his own. The folder on his lap shifted in the wind. He pinned it with a palm, then unfolded it again, tracing each line, each name. Some were scratched in his own handwriting, survivors who had signed years ago before time thinned them out. Others were relatives of the dead. All of them had trusted Sam to keep asking. At 4:01, a silver sedan pulled up to the curb. A man stepped out, gray suit, no tie, glasses fogged from the car's air conditioning. He recognized Sam immediately. A flash of discomfort crossed his face before he adjusted his jacket and walked quickly into the building, ignoring the veteran entirely. Sam didn't flinch. He didn't even lift his head. The man had made promises before. As the hour slipped forward, a few more pedestrians trickled by. One woman paused near the trash can, fiddling with her phone. She looked up once, saw Sam, and looked back down. A teenager on a scooter slowed, stared, then shook his head with a smirk before pushing on. The stillness around him wasn't peaceful. It was isolating. Sam readjusted the paper inside the folder again. One corner had torn. He smoothed it gently, as though bandaging a wound. His hands, veined and knotted by age, still bore the traces of younger strength. They had lifted men from mud, held steel, carried letters he never wanted to read. Now they held a folder, and a name, Rourke, stitched into the fabric of his coat, above faded medals dulled by time. He checked the courthouse door, still closed. No motion inside. The blinds in the lower windows were drawn. A sound behind him. Footsteps. Light, quick. He turned slightly, but the figure passed without acknowledgement. A local reporter. Notepad in one hand, phone in the other. She glanced at him briefly, registered the uniform, the ribbons, the cane, then looked away. There was no headline here. She moved inside. Sam let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Not frustration, not fear, just exhaustion. He folded the paper again, returned it to his coat, tapped the cane twice on the pavement, then settled back and waited. At 4:13, the janitor emerged from the courthouse's side entrance, a bundle of keys jingling from his belt. He paused when he saw Sam. A nod, nothing more. But the kind of nod that meant something. Recognition without intrusion. Sam returned it with a faint tip of his cap. The door to the chamber would open soon. Maybe not for him, but he would be here, as always. Because when the last man standing stops showing up, the names stop being names. They become dust. And Sam Rourke, last of Baker Company, had never once failed to report in. By dusk, only the janitor had nodded to him. The bench had cooled under him. Stone always did this time of year, giving back the sun's warmth just long enough to deceive your bones before surrendering to the chill. Sam shifted his weight, slow and careful, easing the tension in his lower back. The petition folder rested on his lap, untouched now. His hands remained folded over it, motionless, except for the occasional twitch in his index finger, a reminder of the nerves damaged by shrapnel in 1951. Behind him, the courthouse bell tower cast a long shadow that reached toward the flagpole, stretching slowly across the paving stones. Time, like shadow, didn't ask permission. It simply moved, indifferent to those who remembered and those who forgot. Sam checked the door again, still locked. Inside, the hum of preparation might have begun. The shuffle of paper, the rattle of binders, the dry cough of a clerk who'd rather be anywhere else. A gust of wind stirred the air. It carried the scent of engine exhaust and fallen leaves. Sam adjusted his cap. The stiffened fabric resisted slightly. His hat had grown brittle over the years, the seams at the edge beginning to fray. He didn't mind. The cap was older than most of the people who worked in that building. From the sidewalk, two men emerged from the deli across the street, laughing at something that probably wasn't funny. One of them slowed when he saw Sam. He tilted his head, then leaned toward the other and whispered something with a smirk. They both looked. They didn't speak to him, just kept walking, one shaking his head, the other chuckling like a joke had just finished telling itself. Sam didn't move. The sun, now below the roofs, threw gold onto the windows behind him, but it didn't touch his face. His medals reflected none of it. They sat silent, dull with time, pinned precisely where they had always belonged. He reached slowly into the inner lining of his coat, retrieving a small, neatly folded cloth. With gentle fingers, he unfolded it and began to polish the brass clasp of one ribbon, not out of vanity, but habit. Each motion deliberate, thumb across metal, cloth across corner, fold, check, press. When he was done, he refolded the cloth and tucked it away again, like a man closing the final page of a well-worn prayer book. The courthouse remained closed. Behind him, a city maintenance truck rumbled by, belching thick diesel into the air. Sam blinked slowly through the haze. He was used to the smell. It reminded him of things he didn't want to remember. Engine smoke, frosted mornings, canvas tents holding too many broken boys. He blinked again and waited for the air to clear. A woman passed by with a bag of groceries, her heels clicking sharply on the stone. She caught sight of him and hesitated just slightly, enough for him to notice. She gave a half smile, awkward, uncertain, then turned her gaze away as though she'd made a mistake by acknowledging him. Sam didn't respond. He hadn't asked for attention, just for remembrance. He straightened his spine, not out of discomfort, but ceremony. His vertebrae protested with a muted ache, but he held the posture. Men once followed his lead into things he had no words for. Standing still wasn't difficult. The wind shifted. A dry leaf skittered across the ground, bouncing off the toe of his boot. He didn't move. Somewhere behind the courthouse, a truck door slammed. Voices laughed, young, casual, careless, the kind of laughter that didn't know its cost. A man in business casual exited the building next to the courthouse, carrying a briefcase and a fast food cup. He spotted Sam, stopped momentarily, and veered to the opposite side of the plaza. No greeting, no acknowledgement, just avoidance. Sam glanced toward the flag again. It fluttered faintly against the darkening sky. Above it, clouds had begun to roll in, slow and gray. There might be rain later. He didn't mind. He'd stood in worse. Across the street, a local news van pulled into a parking space. A reporter stepped out, clipboard in hand, phone to her ear. She scanned the area. Her eyes found Sam briefly, lingered for a moment, then passed on. She turned her back to him as she entered the side entrance of the building. The door closed behind her with a muted thud, as final as a gavel. A pair of teenagers on scooters circled the edge of the plaza. One, emboldened by the other's laugh, shouted across the open space, "Is it Halloween already?" The other snorted, "Maybe he thinks it's Veterans Day." They rolled off without looking back. Sam closed his eyes for half a second. Not long enough to give them the satisfaction of reaction, just long enough to breathe. When he opened them again, the square was emptier than before. His hand returned to the folder. He adjusted its edge, smoothing it against his thigh, keeping it aligned with the crease of his trousers. The paper inside made no sound. It had nothing left to say. The courthouse lights flickered on behind the frosted glass. Movement stirred inside, shadows passing like ghosts across the windows. The hour was approaching. Soon the doors would open, and once again he would ask. A couple walked past, arms linked, not speaking. The woman looked at Sam, then at her partner. He shrugged. She looked away. Evening had fallen. The sky faded into dull gray, the edges tinged with burnt orange. The temperature dropped with it. Sam tightened the buttons on his coat, slow, deliberate. Not because he was cold, but because it was time. He checked the folder one last time. All names accounted for. No signatures missing. The ink was faded, but legible. Barely. From behind the glass, someone moved toward the front entrance. Sam braced slightly, hopeful, but it was only the janitor again, pushing a mop cart. The door opened with a hydraulic hiss. The janitor stepped out, squinting at the dim light. He spotted Sam, paused, then gave him a nod, small but real. It was the kind of gesture that came not from policy, but memory. A veteran's nod, recognition without need for words. Sam returned the nod slowly, his hand still resting on the cane. The janitor disappeared down the side steps. The mop bucket squeaked in rhythm with his boots. The plaza emptied again. The courthouse doors remained closed. The street lamps flickered to life one by one, casting puddles of dim yellow across the courthouse plaza. Light collected in pools, but the corners remained in shadow. There was no ceremony to the hour, no trumpet call or bell to announce the closing of the building. Just the quiet rhythm of routine. One by one the windows darkened. Inside, the council chambers emptied without sound. Sam remained on the bench. He did not check the time. He didn't need to. He could read it in the posture of the building, the stillness, the silence, the way the air shifted after a place has been emptied of purpose. The evening petition window had passed. They had not opened the door. They had not called his name. They had not spoken a word. He had been here. They had not come. A door creaked open behind him, different this time, sharper, impatient. Footsteps followed, quicker. He recognized the gate before he turned. Younger, nervous. Not the man who had first pushed him away that afternoon, but another, new to the rotation. The guard came toward him with clipped steps, boots striking stone too loud for the quiet hour. He didn't carry the stiffness of command. He carried the restlessness of someone who had been told what to do but didn't fully understand why. Sam looked up slowly, just enough to meet his eyes. He didn't speak. He didn't rise. He waited. The guard stopped just in front of the bench, arms crossed. His breath steamed faintly in the cool air. "You're still here?" he said, not with curiosity, but complaint. Sam blinked once. The guard shifted weight from one foot to the other. "Look, I don't know what the last guy told you, but we're closed. This isn't a hotel. You can't sleep here." Sam didn't move. The guard glanced around. The square was mostly empty now. A few cars passed in the distance, headlights sweeping across storefronts. No one nearby, no witnesses. Just an old man in a uniform, sitting like a statue with a folder on his lap and medals across his chest. "Hey," the guard said again, louder. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." He stepped forward, closer now. His shadow fell across Sam's knees. There was no threat in his posture, not exactly. Just irritation. The kind born of cold evenings and long shifts and the discomfort of facing someone you don't understand. Sam began to rise, slowly, the motion steady, but reluctant. He pressed one hand against the bench for balance, the other gripping the cane as he drew breath through his nose. The air had gone colder. His joints resisted the movement, but he stood. As he did, the folder slipped from his lap, landing on the stone with a muted sound, papers sliding slightly free. He moved to retrieve it. The guard stepped in. "I said don't." His voice rose. He reached out and grabbed Sam's elbow, not with violence, but with command. The kind of grip meant to move, not support. Sam stiffened, not in defiance, but in pain. The fingers dug into a nerve long damaged. His breath caught. "Hey," came a voice from across the street. The guard froze. The voice had come from a young man leaning against a lamppost, wearing a denim jacket and holding a coffee cup. He stepped forward now, one foot into the plaza. "Take it easy, man." The guard turned his head, hand still on Sam's arm. "Mind your business," he snapped. The man hesitated, looked around. No one else seemed to notice or care. He backed away. The guard turned back to Sam, let go of his elbow with a sharp motion, like releasing something unpleasant. "You can't stay here," he said again. "Don't make me call this in." Sam stooped carefully and retrieved the folder, straightening the papers with slow precision before tucking them back beneath the clear sleeve. He didn't look at the guard again. He took one step back, then another, toward the edge of the plaza. His cane struck the pavement with a dull rhythm, tap, step, pause. The kind of walk that required concentration, not from weakness, from damage. The kind of damage that never made it into medals. The guard stood watching, arms crossed again. He said nothing more. From across the street, the young man in the denim jacket finished his coffee and tossed the cup into a bin. He looked once more at the figure walking away, then turned and left. Sam made it to the base of the flagpole and stopped. He adjusted his coat, repositioned the folder against his side, then turned, slowly, and faced the courthouse again. He didn't sit. He didn't retreat. He simply stood, his silhouette cut against the stone backdrop like a memory too strong to forget. And yet, Sam never raised his voice. The air had cooled enough to make breath visible. Wisps of fog rose from Samuel Rourke's lips each time he exhaled, the rhythm of it steady, almost meditative. He stood at the base of the flagpole, not looking at it, but aligned with it, back straight, feet shoulder-width apart, cane lightly gripped in his left hand, the folder resting gently under his right arm like a sacred duty. The courthouse loomed behind him, silent now, its windows dark and its heart indifferent. There was no audience, no ceremony, only him, and still he stood. The light from the street lamps bled down the stone facade of the building, casting soft lines along his shoulders. His shadow, long, thin, unwavering, stretched across the cold stone of the plaza. Behind his heels, a few withered leaves curled in the wind, catching on the edge of his coat but never sticking. He didn't brush them away. His stance was not confrontational, nor defiant. It was a posture drawn from muscle memory older than most of the city council's staff. Every inch of it was informed by years of roll calls, formations, inspections, salutes, by the discipline that war had demanded and peace had ignored. It wasn't about anger. It was about presence. He had not come to shout. He had come to be seen. The folder beneath his arm crinkled faintly as the wind picked up again, lifting one corner just enough to expose a name. Ellison, J.L., scrawled in faded ink. Sam didn't adjust it. He didn't need to read it. He knew every name by order, by voice, by memory. He had carried them longer than anyone else, longer even than some of their families. A passing car slowed as it neared the plaza, headlights sweeping across his chest. For a brief moment, the rows of ribbons lit up with unnatural clarity. Red, silver, gold, faded blue. The car moved on without stopping. The lights vanished. The ribbons returned to shadow. Sam's fingers, curled around the handle of his cane, shifted slightly. Not from pain, from cold. He flexed them once, slowly, and then returned to stillness. The cane's wooden handle was worn to a polish where his palm had rested for years. It had belonged to another Marine once, a man who'd lost a leg outside Busan and made Sam promise to keep walking long after he couldn't. He had. And now, even with a knee that locked when it shouldn't, and a spine that had more steel than bone, Sam Rourke was still walking, still showing up, still waiting. A gust of wind tugged at his coat. He turned his chin against it slightly, not to shield himself but to remain composed. His collar fluttered. The insignia on his left breast, a modest silver eagle, caught the edge of the light. It had once been polished daily. Now it bore the soft patina of years, its edges dulled but never forgotten. He reached up slowly, adjusting the edge of his collar. The motion was precise, controlled. His fingers followed a pattern. Straighten, smooth, press. No wasted movement. The same way he had done in barracks. The same way he had done in the mud. The same way he would always do. He breathed in through his nose, and the air burned slightly. Dry, crisp, biting. It reminded him of Incheon, of November frost, and the taste of canvas tents before dawn. He didn't chase the memory. It arrived when it wanted, and it left without notice. Behind him, the flag above the courthouse whispered in the wind. The rope clinked faintly against the pole, an irregular chime like the last breath of a chapel bell. It was the only sound now. The plaza had emptied. The world had moved on, but Sam had not. He hadn't flinched when the guard touched him. He hadn't replied when the boy mocked him. He hadn't left when the council doors failed to open. He had, instead, stood, not in pride, but in principle. Not for himself, but for names written on a plaque no one could read anymore. Names that had once echoed across battlefields, whispered through helmet radios, sobbed into field hospital sheets. Names that mattered once. Names that still mattered, if only someone would speak them. Sam looked down briefly, and with slow, careful motion, he opened the folder one more time. He flipped past the cover, his eyes pausing on each line as though confirming their presence. Carter, Myers, Ellison, Thomas, Griggs, Montoya, Phillips, Rourke. He lingered a moment on that last one. Not for himself, for the brother who had died carrying it. The wind lifted the page slightly, and Sam pressed it down with the back of his hand. The motion was tender, like laying flowers on a grave. A headlight flickered across the far end of the square. A car had pulled up, engine running, not yet parked. It sat there, unmoving, like a breath held at the edge of an answer. The shape of the vehicle was too far to recognize, but it had not passed by. Sam didn't turn. Not yet. He closed the folder slowly, aligning its corners with precision, then tucked it back beneath his arm. His right hand returned to the cane, and once more he stood, silent, unshaken. But a man in a dark Ford across the street hadn't driven off. The Ford sat parked along the far edge of the plaza, its engine humming low beneath the murmur of the wind. Headlights off, windows slightly fogged. Inside, behind the wheel, Aaron Delgado watched in silence. The dashboard light cast a faint orange glow across his hands, revealing the worn skin of knuckles that had once broken glass for a living, and the faded lines of a tattoo that had been inked too early, too fast, and never removed. His coffee sat in the console beside him, untouched for the last hour. It had gone cold. He didn't care. His hands remained folded over the steering wheel, his eyes locked on the figure standing across the square. The uniform, the cane, the folder, the stillness. He'd seen it all before, every Thursday for the last 3 weeks. Always the same, always in silence, always ending in nothing. Aaron hadn't meant to stop tonight. He never did. Most weeks, he just happened to be passing by. Coincidence, he told himself. Curiosity, maybe. But deep down, something else tugged at him. Something quiet and heavy, like the gravity of a place you thought you'd forgotten, until you're pulled back without warning. He hadn't worn his own uniform in years. Not since they packed him out of his last post with a handshake, a box of paperwork, and a back that still clicked from the blast in Helmand. He had served as a military police officer for nearly a decade, kept order in sand and heat, in barracks and compounds, in places where boys aged too quickly and men disappeared too quietly. Now he worked downtown, buried in court schedules and paper trails. Clerk's office, 3rd floor, no weapon, no salute. Just numbers and signatures and files he couldn't bring himself to care about. Some mornings, he barely remembered how he got to his desk, but Thursday evenings, those stayed with him. The old man had first caught his eye when Aaron had parked late outside the diner on Jefferson, waiting for a phone call that never came. He'd watched the slow, deliberate walk across the plaza, the way the man paused before the steps, the way he checked his collar, the way he waited, unmoved, unnoticed. He didn't know his name yet, but he knew his kind. Men like that didn't just appear, they came from something, built from something, bent but never broken. Forgotten by those who didn't want to carry the weight of their names. Aaron leaned forward slightly now, elbows resting on the wheel. His breath fogged the windshield in a slow bloom, softening the image before him. The old man hadn't sat down again, still standing, shoulders square, facing the courthouse like it owed him an answer. He'd seen the guard approach earlier, too young, too cocky. Saw the way he grabbed the old man's arm, saw the flinch, the hesitation, the tension. Aaron's hands had tightened on the wheel then. Instinct. Old wiring. The part of him that used to step in before things turned sideways. But he hadn't moved. Not then. Just watched. That shame sat with him now. A dull ache in the gut that no amount of discipline could quiet. He hated that part of himself. The part that waited. The part that measured whether it was his place. A gust of wind rattled the street sign on the corner. He blinked, reached for the glove box, hesitated, then opened it. Inside, tucked beside a faded first aid kit and a spare pair of gloves, was a small worn leather case, no larger than a paperback. He picked it up slowly, cradled it in his hands, and opened it with reverence. Inside lay his service ribbon, dusty, the clasp slightly bent. Afghanistan campaign. Years old now. It wasn't about pride. It wasn't about nostalgia. It was about memory, about truth. He held it for a long moment. His thumb brushed the edge. Then he closed the case and set it on the seat beside him. He didn't reach for his badge. He didn't put on his old jacket. He just opened the door. The sound was sharp in the quiet night, a hinge groaning against neglect. He stepped out, the gravel crunching under his boots, and shut the door behind him. He didn't rush, didn't call out, just crossed the street with steady steps, each one echoing faintly against the hollow hush of the plaza. As he approached, the man didn't turn, didn't react, didn't need to. Aaron stopped 5 paces behind him, took a breath, and waited. The square was silent, but for the low hum of distant traffic and the brittle whisper of leaves dragging across stone. Aaron Delgado stood behind Sam Rourke without saying a word. His hands were at his sides, open, steady. There was no announcement. No approach for conversation, no clearing of his throat. He simply stood there, letting the silence speak first. Before him, Sam remained motionless, his shoulders still square, his chin held at that slight military angle that made it clear this was not a man confused or lost. This was a man standing in formation, even if he stood alone. But now, he didn't. Aaron took one step forward, then another, and when he reached Sam's right side, he paused and turned to face the courthouse with him. They did not make eye contact. No words passed. There was just the slight sound of the wind threading between them, and the rasp of fabric as Aaron reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew the small leather case. He opened it slowly, carefully, as if unfolding a flag. The sound of the latch unhooking was nearly inaudible, but to Aaron it felt like a drum beat. Inside, his ribbon, worn but intact, lay against the dark suede lining. He had not touched it in years. Not since the ceremony in Virginia when they handed it over with a folded letter and a nod that said, "Now go back to the world." He removed it with both hands and looked at it for a long second. The wind stirred again. His fingers, steady now, extended toward Sam. Without breaking his posture, Sam turned his head slightly, only as much as he needed to see. Aaron held the ribbon out, palm flat. "Permission to stand with you, sir?" The words were quiet, but firm. They landed not just in Sam's ears, but somewhere deeper, in the hollow where memory and dignity share space. Sam blinked, once, twice, then nodded once, the barest motion, but unmistakable. Aaron stepped beside him. He didn't pin the ribbon to his chest. He placed it gently into Sam's hand, then returned to his own stance. Heels together, back straight, arms relaxed at his sides. The position was not ceremonial, it was military. Parade rest, not in front of the courthouse, not in front of the flag, but beside the man who refused to disappear. For a moment, the square held its breath. Then the air changed. A pair of footsteps approached from the left, slow and uncertain. A man, middle-aged, coat slung over one shoulder, crossed the edge of the plaza, his brow furrowed. He paused, watching them, eyes flicking from Sam's uniform to the ribbon now clutched in his hand. He didn't speak. He just stood at a respectful distance. Then another joined. A young woman with a red scarf and a paper bag of groceries, who had passed by earlier. She stopped, set the bag down by her feet, and stood in quiet stillness across from them, not mimicking their posture, just being present. One by one, more arrived. Some trickled from the sidewalk, drawn by the sight of two men standing still under the courthouse light. Others emerged from side streets or cars parked nearby. Not a crowd, not yet, just enough to be noticed. A murmur passed through them, not words, but shared breath. Inside the courthouse, the blinds remained shut. The rooms stayed dark, but the outside had begun to change. The junior security guard, still lingering by the steps, now watched from a distance. His earlier confidence had faded into something quieter. Not guilt, not yet, but a hesitation, a shifting of weight. He did not approach again. Across the square, a teenager lowered his phone. He had been filming. He wasn't anymore. He was watching now. Aaron didn't look at the people gathering. He didn't break formation. He didn't need to. Beside him, Sam adjusted the folder in his hand and straightened his stance one more time. The corners of his cap trembled slightly in the breeze, but his face was calm. The ribbon Aaron had given him now rested atop the folder, held in place by his thumb. It was not a decoration. It was a statement. The square had fallen silent again, but not the silence of neglect, the silence of listening. And then, without a word, one person stepped forward. Then two. The plaza had begun to breathe differently. The air, once thin with apathy, now thickened with quiet attention. There was no leader, no announcement, no call to gather. And yet, they came, drawn not by spectacle, but by the unmistakable stillness of something sacred unfolding. Sam did not turn to see them. He didn't need to. He could feel the change behind him, The subtle shift in pressure, the way silence thickened, when more than two hearts began to beat in rhythm. His eyes remained fixed on the darkened courthouse windows, but his left hand, resting on the cane, gripped it with slightly more weight, not to steady himself, but to mark the moment. Beside him, Aaron stood like stone, his breath visible, slow and steady. He hadn't moved since stepping into position. His body knew how to wait, how to honor. His eyes flicked once toward the gathering crowd, then forward again. There was nothing to say. His presence had already spoken. A mother knelt quietly near the sidewalk, her daughter tucked beside her, small hands clutching a stuffed animal that dragged on the ground. The little girl looked toward the two men with a curious seriousness. Not confusion, but respect she didn't yet have words for. Her mother leaned in, whispered something, and the girl nodded. Then, they simply stayed. Two teenagers with skateboards, who'd earlier laughed and rolled past, now hovered at the corner of the square. They didn't speak. They leaned against the stone planter, eyes lowered, hands fidgeting without rhythm. The laughter was gone. In its place, awareness, a new kind of weight. A man in a tan jacket, clearly off duty, stepped forward and removed his cap. No gesture, no salute. Just a removal of the barrier between him and whatever was happening here. He stood near the back, eyes wet, jaw clenched. Sam adjusted the folder beneath his arm, subtly rebalancing it. The motion drew no attention, but it was enough to reveal the name at the top. Private First Class Carter, MJ, written in black ink that had begun to blur. A soft wind lifted the edge of the page again, but Sam did not let it fall. His thumb pressed down gently, as if holding the name in place. Aaron turned his head slightly now, finally looking at Sam. He didn't speak, but after a beat, he asked the question that only a real soldier would know. "Chosin?" Sam blinked once, slowly, then gave the faintest nod. "5th Marines," he said. His voice was not hoarse, not shaking, just tired, deep tired. Frozen boots, Chinese over the ridge, lost 12 in the dark, walked out with 3. Aaron nodded once in reply, the kind of nod that contained 100 words. He knew what those words meant, knew what the cold did to skin and what silence did to memory. He didn't ask for more, didn't need to. Sam opened the folder at last, just a few inches. The papers inside were yellowed at the corners, creased with use. Handwriting crowded the pages, each signature distinct, some elegant, others hurried and scrawling. Sam turned a page and held it open between them, angled just enough for Aaron to see. "These," he said, "these were boys, farmers, pipe fitters. One was going to be a teacher. One had a stutter so bad he couldn't say his name without choking on it. But in the dark, in the mud, in the frost, they didn't hesitate." Aaron looked down at the list. "They were mine," Sam added. "No one said their names in years." Aaron looked at him, and this time, his voice caught just slightly. "They will now." Sam didn't smile, but something softened in the corners of his eyes. He closed the folder again, tucked it beneath his arm, and returned to stillness. The ribbon Aaron had given him remained atop it, the only thing that didn't shift in the wind. Behind them, the group had grown, quiet, respectful, unmoving. Some stood with their hands clasped in front of them, others with their arms behind their backs. A few simply held their breath, afraid to disturb the weight of the moment. No signs were held, no chants were made, no slogans were spoken. It was not a protest. It was a formation. From the shadows, a young man who had once mocked Sam now stepped closer. He didn't approach directly. He didn't try to insert himself into the moment, but he lingered at the edge, his hands stuffed into his jacket pockets, head lowered, eyes fixed on the ground. He didn't say sorry, but the silence said enough. The janitor from earlier appeared once more, this time holding a folding chair. He approached with hesitation, offering it gently. Sam looked at it, then shook his head once. "I've stood longer and worse," he said, almost kindly. The janitor didn't argue. He simply set the chair nearby and stepped back, hat removed, eyes low. A church bell rang in the distance, not marking the hour, but for a funeral several blocks away. The echo floated across the rooftops like a final benediction, soft and solemn. Sam shifted his weight once more, settling into the familiar ache in his joints. His breathing slowed, and when he looked back to the courthouse, the windows, once dark, now reflected the presence behind him. He wasn't alone anymore. The cold had settled in now, not the sharp bite of early frost, but the slow, creeping kind that worked its way through seams and fabric, resting deep in the bones. Still, Sam stood. His hand, veined and rigid, remained steady on the cane, though his fingers had begun to lose their color. Aaron noticed, but said nothing. He knew the gesture would matter more than comfort. A dog barked faintly in the distance. Somewhere down the street, a door slammed. Life moved on. But within the square, time had taken on a different rhythm. Slow, reverent, listening. Aaron's eyes had returned to the list of names he'd glimpsed in the folder. He could still see the way Sam had handled it. Not like paper, but like history. He turned his head slightly, not to break the silence, but to offer what needed to be asked. "What did it smell like?" he asked, voice low like a confession. "After Chosin?" Sam didn't answer at first, not because he hadn't heard, but because the question required something more than memory. It required honesty. "Red clay," he said at last. "Like rust, blood in the dirt, steam rising off the dead when the sun came up over the ridge, like someone poured iron into the snow." Aaron nodded, the kind of nod that doesn't interrupt. Sam wasn't speaking to glorify. He wasn't telling war stories. He was remembering men, moments, smells that hadn't left him even after 70 years. "Your feet stuck in the ice," Sam continued. "Your boots froze stiff, and you'd have to break them loose with the butt of your rifle. If you waited too long, your toes wouldn't feel it. Didn't matter if you were warm. If you were still moving, you weren't dead." Aaron let the silence sit. He could feel it vibrating against the stone beneath his boots, humming in his chest. These weren't just words. This was testimony. "They came out of the trees," Sam said, softer now. "Hundreds of them. No lights, no sound, just snow and rifles, and the sound of boys who didn't think they'd see morning." He opened the folder again, his hands slow, deliberate. He flipped past the top sheet and pulled out a photo, old, grainy, black and white. 5 men, all young, all grinning through the grime, faces red from cold. One had a helmet pushed back, revealing a mop of hair too wild for a regulation cut. Another held up 2 fingers behind Sam's shoulder, frozen in a boyish prank. Sam looked at the picture like it was a window. "Carter was 17, he said. "Faked his age just like I did. His boots didn't fit. He tied socks around the tops to keep the snow out. One night he sang while we cleaned our rifles. Gospel. Soft, like his mama was in the foxhole with us." He turned the photo toward Aaron, who studied it with quiet reverence. "Griggs used to fix radios," Sam said. "Could rewire a busted field set with a fork and a battery. Myers never stopped smiling, not once. Not even when we lost 3 on the same hill." Aaron looked at the photo again, trying to memorize the faces. Sam slid the picture back into the folder. "I made them a promise," he said. "Not with words, not in ceremony. Just one of those looks you give when you know someone might not make it. I told them I'd remember. I told them I'd say their names." He held the folder out to Aaron. "I've said them every week," he added, "but no one's heard." Aaron took the folder carefully, not as a clerk, not as a soldier, but as a witness. "They'll hear now," he said. From behind them a voice spoke, hesitant, unfamiliar. "Who is he?" The question came from a woman near the back of the gathering. She hadn't meant it to be loud, but in the hush, it carried. Aaron turned toward her, eyes steady, voice calm. "Sergeant Samuel Rourke," he said. "United States Marine Corps. Last man standing from Baker Company, 5th Marines. Korea." The silence that followed was no longer passive. It was reverent. The junior security guard, still standing awkwardly near the courthouse entrance, shifted uncomfortably. His hands, once stuffed defiantly into his vest, now hung loose by his sides. The name meant something now. It reached somewhere deeper than policy or protocol. His eyes dropped. He took one small step back, and then another. No one noticed him leave. Back at the front of the formation, Sam lowered his eyes. He hadn't moved, but something in his stance had changed. Not softer, but settled. Like a man who'd finally been heard. He didn't need applause. He needed memory. And now, the square was holding it with him. The sun had long dipped below the line of buildings, but the plaza glowed with a quiet light that didn't come from the lamps. It came from presence, from the people now standing in silent respect, shoulder to shoulder, forming an unbroken perimeter around Sam Rourke. They weren't friends or followers. They weren't volunteers. They were witnesses. The kind of people who didn't know they needed to be here until they were. No one told them to arrive. And yet, by dawn, there were 300. Veterans of every branch had begun to appear, quietly, without flash. A man with a stiff gait and a United States Army baseball cap stood just inside the line. A woman with a Navy windbreaker and a service pin clipped to her collar leaned against a cane that looked just like Sam's. There were old boots, faded fatigues, flags held gently in trembling hands. But there were also young ones, grandchildren, sons, daughters, neighbors, students, none of them holding signs, all of them holding space. Some came in uniform, some came in jeans. One man brought a camp chair and set it beside Sam just in case. Sam still didn't sit. Near the front, Aaron stood unmoving. His eyes scanned the crowd with trained calm, but his heart beat hard beneath his coat. He had never seen this kind of gathering before. Not at a parade, not at a memorial, not even at a funeral. It was different. It had grown out of something real, something earned. Sam's fingers flexed lightly on the folder still held under his arm. His other hand rested on the cane, but his posture hadn't shifted. He hadn't spoken again. He didn't need to. His presence had spoken louder than any voice could. The security guard from the day before had not returned. But the courthouse doors opened anyway. The mayor stepped out first. No suit jacket, no press in tow. He was flanked by the city clerk and 2 council members, their expressions drawn, uncertain. There was no microphone, no podium, just shoes crunching softly on gravel as they walked toward the center of the square. The crowd didn't cheer, it didn't move, but it watched. The mayor removed his cap. His voice, when it came, was not loud, but it was firm. "Sergeant Rourke," he said. "We were wrong." He took one step closer. His eyes weren't polished or practiced. They were real. "I read your petition," he continued. "I've read it before, but this time, I heard it." Sam turned his head just slightly. The mayor reached out and accepted the folder, not as a formality, but with both hands, like receiving something holy. "We'll begin restoration on the plaque next week," he said. "The names will be recast, rehung, and read aloud at the next council session. In full. Each of them." The mayor looked out at the crowd, then back to Sam. "And from now on, Thursday evenings belong to you. You will not wait outside. You will not be turned away. Not you. Not any veteran who wears the uniform with dignity. That ends now." Sam gave no speech in return, but he looked the mayor in the eye and nodded once. The gesture landed with more force than 1,000 headlines. Aaron stepped forward then, a paper in his hand, newly signed, ink still damp. He handed it to the mayor. "I've accepted the appointment," he said. "Veteran Affairs Liaison, effective immediately." The mayor nodded back. Aaron turned to Sam. His voice dropped, meant for him alone. "If they forget again," he said, "I'll remind them." Sam looked at him, the line of his mouth tightening with something that wasn't quite a smile, but close. The kind of expression a man earns after watching too many promises broken and seeing one finally kept. The mayor turned to address the growing crowd. "Today, we don't make a tribute," he said. "We make a correction, and it will not be written in stone. It will be practiced. Every day this building is open." Then he took 2 steps back, turned to the nearest staff member, and gestured toward the side of the building. There, resting beneath a tarp, was a new bench. A worker stepped forward and peeled it back slowly, revealing metal lettering carved into the wooden slats. Reserved, in honor of Baker Company, 5th Marines, Chosin Reservoir. The crowd didn't applaud, but the silence that followed held more weight than sound ever could. Sam looked at the bench, but didn't move toward it. Instead, he turned to face the building one more time. His cane tapped softly on the stone as he took 3 steps forward. Then he stopped. Aaron stepped beside him, and from the back of the crowd, a low voice began to speak. Private First Class Carter, M.J., Corporal Myers, L.E., Lance Corporal Ellison, J.R. One by one, the names were spoken, not by a leader, but by the people. Passing the list forward, from memory, from the paper, from the air. 24 names, 24 stories, one man who kept them alive. When the last name was read, the wind stilled, and in that breath between silence and dawn, Sam removed his cap. Not for the mayor, not for the building, but for the boys. 1 week later, the morning came soft and gray, with a drizzle that misted rather than fell. The plaza was quiet again, not empty, but gentled by routine. There were no crowds now, no officials, no statements. The newness had passed. What remained was something quieter, steadier. It was Thursday. The plaque had been remounted days before, gleaming under a fresh coat of sealant, its names newly etched in crisp bronze letters that caught the light like metal born from memory. Above it, the small American flag now hung at permanent half-mast, per a motion passed unanimously by the City Council for all city memorials bearing combat fatalities. A new addition, silent, firm. Beneath the plaque stood the bench. The wood was clean and freshly varnished, but already bore the soft scuffs of boots that had paused to read. The words engraved on the backrest were simple. They did not ask for attention. They assumed it. Reserved, in honor of Baker Company, 5th Marines, Chosin Reservoir. Sam Rourke arrived without ceremony. His pace was slower than the week before. The walk had cost him more than he'd admitted. But he came anyway, in uniform, medals in place, cap brushed and creased. The folded petition, now permanently archived at City Hall, had been replaced by a smaller envelope, hand-addressed and sealed. He approached the plaque the way one approaches a grave, with presence, not performance. Aaron waited beside the bench, not in uniform, but with the same quiet posture he had held that night. He didn't speak, just nodded once as Sam neared. Sam stopped before the plaque and stood still for a long moment. His breath clouded gently in the chilled air. He didn't need to reread the names. They were his, still were, always would be. He stepped back, turned, and took a seat on the bench for the first time. The cane rested across his lap. The envelope remained tucked beneath one hand. He didn't speak. He just looked forward. A child passed with her mother, the same little girl who had been told last week to keep walking. Today they paused. The girl looked at Sam with wide, questioning eyes. Her mother didn't pull her away. She simply lowered herself beside her, whispered again, but this time, she let the whisper finish. The girl stepped forward. In her small hands, folded carefully, was a piece of paper, a crayon drawing of a flag, and a man with medals on his chest. She didn't say a word. She simply held it out. Sam reached out with a steady hand, took the drawing, and studied it with more reverence than if it had been a commendation. His lips moved, just enough for the words to carry only between them. "Thank you, sweetheart." The girl nodded, turned, and skipped back to her mother's side. More passers-by began to trickle through the square. A few slowed, then stopped. Some approached the plaque. Others simply nodded as they passed. One man, clearly a veteran himself, placed a small rock at the base of the memorial, a field habit from overseas deployments left without explanation. Inside the courthouse, the junior security guard stood behind the glass doors. He had seen Sam arrive. He had watched from the same post where he once gripped the man's arm without understanding. Today, he stepped outside. His uniform was pressed, his badge polished. He walked slowly across the plaza, not directly, but with purpose. He removed his cap as he neared and stopped just a few steps from the bench. He didn't stammer. He didn't try to explain. "I was wrong, sir," he said. "Thank you for your service." Sam looked at him, calm, unreadable, then gave the faintest nod. The guard replaced his cap, stepped back, and returned to his post without another word. It wasn't penance. It was change. Sam remained seated until the courthouse bell rang twice. He stood slowly, joints protesting, and tucked the crayon drawing into his coat pocket. The envelope he left behind, placed gently on the bench. It wasn't addressed to anyone, just stamped, sealed, and inscribed with 4 words in neat handwriting: "Let them not forget." As he walked away, Aaron remained behind, now seated on the bench. He picked up the envelope, placed it in his breast pocket, and looked toward the street. He would make sure it reached the right hands. Behind him, the town continued, unaware that a new ritual had begun, not by policy, not by decree, but by witness. Every Thursday from then on, Sam returned, and so did others. Some sat beside him, some across from him. Some stood in silence. Some offered folded notes. One child brought a harmonica and played taps with imperfect breath. There were no orders, no structure, just presence. Respect was no longer requested. It was practiced. And through it all, the plaque stayed dry, the name stayed sharp, and the flag above it never rose above half-mast again. If stories like this resonate with your heart, like and subscribe for more untold moments of honor and kindness. Let us know where you're watching from, and if this moment brought back memories you carry with you. The best way to honor their memory is to keep listening. Click on the suggested video now, and we'll walk together through another untold chapter of courage and sacrifice.